am so proud of the man you have become. Look after the family, okay? I love you, my son.
Therefore, in accordance with Section 4, Article 3, the aforementioned property at 15 Maple Drive is hereby bequeathed to Master Kenji Tanaka.
I used to believe that loyalty was the one thing money could never buy. I found out how wrong I was the same year my father-in-law was dying, and the same year my wife decided she'd rather spend her nights with a man who could buy her things I never could. My name is Daniel, and for 11 years I thought I had a good marriage. Not perfect, but good. Claire and I met in our 20s, married in our late 20s, and built a quiet life together in a house we could barely afford. She worked in interior design. I managed logistics for a shipping company, and neither of us made the kind of money that turns heads. We were comfortable. We were, I thought, happy. Everything changed when her father, Richard, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Richard was not an easy man. He'd built a small construction business from nothing, and he ran his family the same way he ran his job sites, with orders instead of conversations. But he was Claire's father, and when the diagnosis came, someone had to be there for him. Claire said she couldn't handle it. She said hospitals made her sick to her stomach, that she couldn't watch her father waste away, that she needed to protect her own mental health. So I did what I thought a husband should do. I took a leave of absence from work. I moved into Richard's guest room. I learned how to manage his medications, how to change his dressings, how to sit with him through nights when the pain was too much for sleep. For 8 months, I was the one who drove him to chemotherapy. I was the one who held a bucket while he vomited from the treatment. I was the one who read to him when his eyes got too tired to read for himself. Claire visited sometimes, on weekends, always with an excuse for why she couldn't stay longer. I didn't question it at first. Grief does strange things to people, I told myself. She's protecting herself. But there's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from caring for a dying man while your wife is somewhere else entirely, and I felt it every single night. It was Richard, actually, who noticed something was wrong before I did. One evening, when the pain medication had loosened his tongue, he asked me a question I never expected. He asked if Claire was seeing someone. I laughed it off. I told him grief makes people paranoid. But he looked at me with a kind of clarity that sometimes comes right before the end, and he said, "Son, I've watched men lie to themselves their whole lives. Don't be one of them." I didn't want to listen. But 2 weeks later, I found the messages. Claire had left her tablet logged into her email on the kitchen counter, and there it was, an entire thread with a man named Victor, a real estate developer she had met through a client. The messages weren't just flirtatious. They were plans. Weekend trips I'd never heard about, a hotel in another city, photos I wish I could unsee. And worst of all, a message from 3 weeks earlier that said, "I can't keep pretending to care about a dying old man I never liked anyway." I sat with that sentence for a long time. I thought about every bucket I'd held, every night I'd stayed awake listening for Richard's breathing to make sure it hadn't stopped, every excuse I'd made for my wife's absence. And I realized I had been protecting a marriage that had already ended, just without telling me. I didn't confront her right away. Something in me went very still and very calm, the way people describe the moment before a storm. Instead, I went back to Richard's house. I sat by his bed, and for the first time, I told him the truth. I told him what I'd found. I expected him to be angry, to rage the way he raged about everything else in his life. Instead, he just nodded slowly, like a man confirming something he already suspected. "I'm not going to pretend I'm surprised," he said, "but I am going to do something about it." I didn't understand what he meant until 3 days later, when his lawyer showed up at the house with new documents. Richard had built his construction business over 30 years, and it was worth more than any of us had ever said out loud. Because in our family, money was something you didn't discuss. His original will had split everything evenly between Claire and her brother, with a portion set aside for me as his son-in-law. A gesture of gratitude for years of being, in his words, the only one who ever showed up. The new will was different. He left the majority of his estate in a trust, one that named me as the primary caretaker and beneficiary, with provisions that would only release funds to Claire if she could prove, through counseling records, that she'd taken responsibility for the choices she'd made. Her brother, who had also been distant, received a much smaller portion. Richard didn't do it out of cruelty. He told me in one of our last real conversations that he wasn't trying to punish his daughter. He said he was trying to protect what was left of his family from the kind of person who only shows up when there's something to gain. Richard passed away 6 weeks later. I was the one holding his hand. The funeral was the last time I saw Claire cry real tears, though I've since wondered how many of them were for her father and how many were for herself, once she understood what the new will actually meant. When the lawyer read the terms in front of the family, her face went pale in a way I will never forget. Victor, it turned out, had been far less interested in Claire once her inheritance shrank to a fraction of what he'd assumed it would be. Within 2 months, he had stopped answering her calls entirely. I filed for divorce not long after. People sometimes ask me if I feel guilty for benefiting from Richard's decision, as if grief and inheritance can't exist in the same sentence without something ugly attached to them. But I don't feel guilty. I feel like a man who spent 8 months proving who he was, without ever asking for proof in return. Richard saw that. In the end, he was the only person in that family who told me the truth when it mattered. I still think about him sometimes, especially on the anniversary of his passing. Not because of what he left me, but because of what he taught me in those final months. That the people who truly love you are not the ones who show up for the good years. They're the ones who stay in the room when everything is falling apart, when there's nothing left to gain except the simple fact of having done the right thing. Claire moved to another city not long after the divorce was finalized. I heard secondhand that things didn't work out the way she'd planned. I don't take pleasure in that. I only take peace in knowing that I was exactly where I needed to be, holding the hand of a dying man who, in his final act, made sure the truth outlived all of us. If you've ever stayed loyal to someone who didn't deserve it, or if you've ever discovered that the person you trusted most was never really there at all, I hope this story reminded you of something important. Sometimes the truth takes its time, but it always finds its way to the surface.